Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zaria Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Listeners of Outsmart Burnout, I have a treat for you today. We have a very special guest, Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. She is a board-certified internal medicine physician, a speaker, and an award-winning author. She's an international well-being thought leader featured in numerous media outlets, including Prevention, MSNBC, Women's Day, Fast Company, Psychology Today, CNN Health, and of course, TED.com. She's the author of numerous books, including her bestseller, Sacred Rest, Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity, including insight on the 7 types of rest needed to optimize your productivity, increase your overall happiness, overcome burnout, we like to hear that, and live your best life. And over 500,000 people, including yours truly, have discovered their personal rest deficits using her free assessment at restquiz.com. I am so excited to dive into all things burnout and rest with Dr. Saundra. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, I am in such awe of you and your work. And of course, I have followed you and followed the concept of the 7 types of rest. And I have seen it everywhere. I've seen it all over the internet and Pinterest and Instagram, etc. And oftentimes people are not giving you credit. So we are here to fix that today. And I want to hear all about your story and your work and your research and how you discovered this concept and how important it is for all of us, especially women physicians who are on the edge of burnout or beyond burnout, and what we can do to come back from the edge.
Yeah, that was where I started actually as a female physician who soon after my husband and I decided to start our family is when burnout really set in. And honestly, it wasn't a conversation I was trying to have. I wasn't looking to create something that was spread around. I was actually just trying to figure out how to be sustainable in a career that I loved. And so that was really the heart behind the initial process of the research. I had done everything I could to try to determine why I was exhausted. You know, you're a doctor, you can check all the labs, do all the tests. I did all the things and I was perfectly healthy, still exhausted. At the time, the big conversation was around sleep health. And so there was a sleep revolution happening, books out by the title Sleep Revolution and all the things. And that's where I began. I thought, okay, maybe it's, I have young kids, both under the age of 2, working ridiculous hours as a internist. Maybe I just am not getting good enough sleep. My sleep quality maybe isn't good enough. And so that's where I started the conversation with myself on how to overcome the level of fatigue that I was feeling, and that didn't work. I checked my sleep. I did a sleep study. I was monitoring my sleep. My sleep was fine, and I was still exhausted. And that's when it really kind of the bells and whistles went off in my head that there's something else going on here. There's nothing metabolically wrong with me. There's nothing physical that I can tell. My sleep's good. Why am I still tired? And so I started looking at what else could be exhausted. And from that conversation and that pursuit of trying to overcome my own burnout is where the 7 types of rest research began.
I love that. I mean, I think so many people listening to this show will recognize themselves in that story and then will think, okay, well, I am tired. Or, people used to ask me, how are you? And I think my first answer was always tired or stressed or both. I think that's just that was my default mode. And I I think I normalized it for a really long time. I think that's just what being in medicine is. It's like you're exhausted and you're stressed out, and I guess that's just my new normal. And we didn't really question that. And I think that's a big problem. I mean, that's where a lot of physicians and a lot of women physicians, especially, were trying to do all the things, juggle all the things, especially. I can't believe you're a mom of two young kids and trying to do all of this at once. And it is exhausting. Did you suspect that you were burned out or you didn't? And how did you come to that realization?
Time, no. Burnout wasn't a conversation people were having. The World Health Organization hadn't really identified it as a thing at that
Nope.
time. So at that time, I just felt like I'm tired. And so the concept of burnout, the concept of rest deficits, energy management, none of those things were being discussed, at
Mm-mm.
that point in time. And so it was really one of those out of the box pursuits to try to determine what was going on. And I think that's a part of, I feel like, why the research has had such a resonance with people, and why it's kind of being shared like it is. It's kind of gained a energy of its own, independent of me, even as the creator of it, because it resonates so much with people. People can identify that there's a part of their fatigue that has not had vocabulary, and the
Yes.
7 types of rest gives it vocabulary, and vocabulary is it's hard to contain when people start having language to share with each other. And I find that that has been the biggest growth of it, even with when after initially, this was just something I was sharing with my husband. Like, I think I have an emotional, I think emotional fatigue is what I'm experiencing, or I think I'm creatively fatigued, and just kind of sharing it between myself, my family members, my husband, and then that's when I started branching it out to my patients, because people were always coming in telling me they're tired. That's always been a thing. But as I mentioned, I wasn't doing the research with a mindset of I'm putting this into clinical practice, or I'm even going to write a book or do anything else about this. I just was trying to survive. And when I started noticing that so many of my patients were saying the same things that I had been saying to myself, and labs were normal, all the same situation, everything looked good on paper and on the labs, but they looked tired. They actually looked drained, depleted at the end of themselves. I just started kind of typing up these little mini guides that I would give out within my clinic to my own patients, just literally typed up on paper. We copy and print. I tell my nurse, give them the one on mental rest or give them the one on physical rest. And that's how we started this. And it was so interesting because patients then would come back and say, "Hey, do you have another one of those? I need to give it to my cousin." Or I think my friend needs, has this. Can you see them? And that's when I started noticing that, okay, there's something else going on here.
Okay, I love this, and I love giving language to things. Hobby linguist in my free time, and translator, and all the things. And I also, when I was burned out, I would never have described myself as burned out because I didn't have the words. I didn't have the language to describe it. I just thought I was exhausted. I thought maybe I was having a nervous breakdown. I don't know. I didn't know what to call it. So I do think language is power and knowledge is power. So let's dive in to the 7 types of rest, because I think for people listening, maybe they've heard of it, maybe they haven't. So there's, of course, physical, which is the one that everyone thinks of, right? That's just, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I haven't gotten enough sleep, or I've been up all night working a night shift, or I ran a marathon or something, right? And is that the one that most people are most familiar with, would you think?
Yeah, physical rest, I think, is where most people begin when they think they're tired. They think that because it's associated with activity. People think, I did something active, now I'm tired. And so physical rest is where people begin, but usually they stop at just the concept of, I need to undo movement or undo whatever the activity is. It's the rest is focused on cessation activities, the stopping. It's not focused
Mm,
on restoration, the pouring back in, which is really the core of the work that I do. It's not simply about, I need to take a pause or I need to take a break. That's where the conversation has been for too long. That's why sleep has been a focus and vacations have been a focus and all these things that tell you to get away from it, stop all the stop all the work, just move to an island kind of thought process. My concept is more around restorative practices, which mean even in the physical, what are the active things you do that restore? And so that's the mindset shift that most people miss.
Okay. This is golden nugget aha moment right here, I think. Press pause, stop whatever you're doing, come back, listen to this part because this is so important and so revolutionary, I think, is that yes, we always think of rest or, you know, if you're going to try to heal from overwork or overdoing it, that you have to just sort of stop. It's the absence of things rather than the presence of something that might be restorative. And so you talk a little bit about active versus passive forms of rest and dive into that a little bit for us. And then we will continue to talk about the 7 types of rest. We're going to keep you guys waiting on your toes here.
Yeah. So with physical rest, even there's the passive forms. Those are the things we've been discussing for a while: sleeping, napping, sitting around doing nothing. Those are some of the passive forms, and they are beneficial to some degree, but they in themselves can't fully cause a completeness of physical rest. So the active forms of physical rest include all those things that improve your circulation, your lymphatics drainage, that help with your muscle flexibility. And so they include things like stretching or using a foam roller or something like getting a massage or even going for a leisure walk. They also include things like evaluating the work dynamics of where you do your work at, the body ergonomics of your desk, the height of your monitor, how your body conforms to the chair that you do your day-to-day work in. All of those components fit into the physical rest bucket.
Okay, I love that. So I feel like we've touched on physical rest, and most people are pretty comfortable with that concept. Let's move on down the ladder into the different types, the 7 different types of rest, what they are, what they look like, different examples so that people can get familiar. So you can
So
list them all and then we can go through them maybe.
yeah, so the 7 include physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative. So those are the 7. Physical we just discussed. Mental is evaluating your cognitive function, how well your memory works, how well you're able to focus, if you're having ruminating thoughts, are you able to clear your mind? And so those types of symptoms are what presents if someone has a mental rest deficit. If someone has a spiritual rest deficit, they have a tendency to lack motivation, don't see purpose in the work that they're doing. Someone with an emotional rest deficit may be the type of person who's people pleasing, or they feel like they have to suppress their emotions because of the type of work that they do. A social rest deficit would show itself up in someone who is in a situation where they're usually the one giving and never receiving, so their relationships are always in the negative, pulling from them socially, and they have a lack of life-giving or the type of relationships that really feed you. Sensory rest deficits usually present for those who work either positions them for sensory overload. Maybe they're in noisy situations, maybe it's bright lights, maybe they're doing like virtual work where they're constantly on screens all day, those kind of things. And then creative rest deficits tend to show themselves up for people who are problem solving a lot, having to think creatively, thinking outside of the box. Diagnosis as a physician is a high level of creative work because you're taking all the pieces and trying to figure out what
Mm,
they mean. And so creative rest deficits show up for a lot of people because even though they may not see themselves as a creative, they're using creative type innovative energy.
Hey, quick pause. If you're a female physician listening to this episode, but your mind is racing, your shoulders are up by your ears, and you often feel like you have heart palpitations, if you're up late replaying a tough case from earlier that day, unable to fall asleep, if you're dreading your next shift and snapping at your husband and kids, you might even be starting to wonder, why did I choose medicine? Did I choose the wrong career? And believe me, I've been there. And I created something tailor made for you, the SOS session. Step out of survival mode. It's a 90-minute intensive single session because When you're stressed and burned out, a long coaching program or endless trainings just feel like one more thing on your to do list that you can't finish. And I get it. I'm a Harvard trained neurologist who walked away from clinical medicine for many of these same reasons. In our deep dive session, we'll use my RISE framework. Recognize what's keeping you stuck, investigate your stress patterns, shift your nervous system, and finally learn to embody regulation as your new normal. You'll go from shallow breathing and dreading every shift to finally exhaling, being present with your family, and remembering why you love medicine in the first place. Go to drzaria.myflowdesk.com to learn more and claim your session. Okay, let's get back to the show. Okay. This is so interesting. I love all of this. And I think it's all so fascinating and important for folks to hear this and to maybe listen and pay attention and try to identify, like, yeah, that could be me. There was something that occurred to me when I was going through all of this and when I took the quiz that there's sort of a deficit from overuse. And then I feel like there's also a deficit from underuse. How do I put this? So, for social, for example, I mean, I didn't think I would score that high on that one because I'm a massive extrovert and people person. And so, being in social situations doesn't tax me. It's really fun. I love talking. That's why I have a podcast. But when I have a lack of meaningful social interaction, that's when I feel depleted in that area. And so talk to us a little bit about that and what you think.
Yeah, social rest is an interesting one because it differs based on someone's lend or bent towards introversion versus extroversion, how they gain energy. Both introverts and extroverts need time with people and time alone. So both need both types of rest, the passive and the active and the socially, but it's a matter of amount. And that's what's very individualized. One person flourishes with more time alone, the other person flourishes with more time with life giving people where they feel kind of energized from the interactions. So you have to allow yourself to see what fills you up, what actually restores, leaves you feeling better than how you entered into the situation and which situations actually begin to drain you. Because for someone who, let's say, is an introvert, being in socially active situations can be quite draining. And so they're not going to want to accept a job or career or something of that nature that has them 24 hours a day, kind of always on, because they're never going to really feel as if they get filled back up in that bucket. They're going to want to see, how do I find some level of balance in that so that I have the energy to do people when I have to be around them. And I also have time that I get filled back up socially in the ways that are restorative to me.
Mm. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me that, I mean, certainly being a mom of young children, that you are constantly outpouring in a social way. And people aren't necessarily pouring into you. I mean, the time that we're recording this, it was just Mother's Day. I mean, it's almost become like cliche in these memes where the moms are the ones organizing everything for Mother's Day. And that is, I think, a form of social exhaustion as well.
Yeah. And I think a lot of moms can can relate to that. It's like, "Oh, it's Mother's Day. I have to pick out what we're having for dinner," or whatever it is. I still have lots of work that I have to do even in
Oh, yes.
celebrating myself. So I think for a lot of women, particularly because of, some call it mom guilt, there's all kind of terms people use for it. I feel like oftentimes women have a struggle sometimes with rest because there's this sense of, if I'm not doing the work, who's doing it? It's like it's got to get done. And if I don't do it, he's doing it. And so it pulls us away from seeing rest as something that should be a natural integrated part of our lives. to the bonus thing we get to do if there happens to be an extra moment somewhere in our life or our day. Let's be honest, that never happens. There's no extra bonus days or hours or anything in any of our lives. It's very intentional. There has to be a high level of intentionality and prioritization for rest to become part of a routine or part of a practice that someone is doing within their life.
Yeah, I think that that is so accurate and so salient that we see rest as maybe possibly a reward at the end of a very long road, very long journey, that it's not something that we're entitled to along the way in the beginning. We have to earn it. And so, how do you help people, well, especially women, reprogram that way of thinking that I'm not, I don't deserve rest?
Yeah, I always begin with the concept of really evaluating, especially for women who are moms, do you want that life for your child? Do you really want your child to watch you run around burned out, tired, exhausted, no smile on your face, always feeling stressed, and think that's normal? And think
Yeah.
that's what I should aspire to be one day.
Or snapping at your kids or your
Yeah.
family, because you're short and your fuse is short at that point. And I think there's also the concept, I know a lot of people that I work with, it's like that rest is laziness.
Yeah,
How do we
that is
combat
very
that?
common. That's a concept I think a lot of people initially begin with, but I love that in the past couple of years, people are starting to realize that really what a lot of people think as laziness is actually is a restoration of the energy, because
Mhm, mhm.
lazy means that you are stopping for the sake of stopping with no future goals and no mindset of what the stopping can produce. However, restoration is intentional stopping, where you recognize that in the stopping, it is empowering you to go do greater work. And I think that's the mindset shift sometimes that has to happen. That rest is actually what's going to make you a better parent. It's what's going to make you more effective at the job and the work and the creativity and the success or whatever that may mean to you. Because right now you're feeling exhausted and feeling tired. You're probably still showing up every day at your job. You're probably still showing up every day with your family, but you're showing up pouring from the empty part of yourself. You're giving what's left, not what's best. What would that look like if you
Mm.
actually took a couple of minutes each day to do a restorative practice? We're not saying to you have to take a long sabbatical or create time that's not there. Most of the time, these restorative practices can be stacked onto habits you're already doing. So you're not even having to create time. You're just having to be more intentional with how you're using your current time. And by adding on maybe a restorative practice in the place of your current rest deficit, you start filling back up that empty spot so that now you're
Mm.
not functioning from your emptiness, but you're actually functioning from a higher level of capacity because you've been filled up and you're practicing restoration on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that, and I do sometimes entice my, overachievers to say, "Well, if you rest more, you'll be more productive," which isn't necessarily the ultimate goal. It's, rest for the sake of rest. It's really it's an end in and of itself. But can you give us some examples of some of these restorative practices that folks could maybe try out at home?
Yeah, so there's a couple that tend to be effective for more people. One of them is specifically as it relates to mental rest. A lot of people struggle with when they go to bed at night, they have a hard time turning their mind off. They're thinking all the thoughts and having a difficult time releasing them. And so some people call it brain dumping. There's lots of different terms for it. But basically, when you're jotting something down on a piece of paper, even dictating it into your phone so your notes can record it, the brain recognizes that the information is now stored. It's been parked somewhere where it can come back and retrieve it
Yeah.
later. And it gives it a sense of, okay, I can release it now. It's no longer my responsibility to hold on or to remind them of that particular thought. And so that's one activity. It's a mental rest activity that can help you kind of release some of the rumination thoughts and break some of the mental loops that people can get caught up in that prevent deeper sleep and prevent being able to actually focus or clear their mind. Another one is being aware of your sensory inputs and then changing your environment so that your environment is more pointing you towards a parasympathetic response rather than a sympathetic response. So if you sit down at your desk and everywhere you look there's papers and stacks of stuff and it's just visually overwhelming,
Are
that's
you
gonna
in my office right now? Oh, dear.
that's gonna create a little bit of anxiety, and so that type of setup is going to lend your body towards a sympathetic response. You're gonna feel a little bit more anxious than in a space that's a little more simplistic, maybe has more white space on the desk, more room for your eyes to land. Also, if you're, let's say, for example, even someone working at a hospital or a medical practice, because this is one that I found for myself was always an issue. You mentioned snapping at our kids when we get home. Sometimes that's because of a sensory rest overload. When we become sensory overwhelmed, it decreases our ability to manage patience and actually to be able to stay in a place of psychological calm. And so, for some people, when they become sensory overwhelmed, their response is irritation, agitation, rage, or anger. And so you may find that at the end of the day, you're like, why am I so snappy at everybody? Why am I so grumpy? And it could be because of some of the sensory inputs. I know for myself, part of my job has me working in the ICU. And so I'm in the
Mm.
ICU, cardiac monitors are going off, vents are going off, there's all kind of noises and sounds. You open up
Yeah.
the
Oh,
negative
boy.
pressure door, it starts beeping. All this stuff is happening at the same time. I used to always say, oh, I just tune it out. I don't really hear it after a while, but tuning it out is energy being used. You don't tune anything out. Your brain filters it. And in the filtering process, it's using energy to filter out what's safe and what's not safe. And so in those situations, I didn't realize that the whole time my brain was on high alert because if a pattern changed in someone's heartbeat, I would actually go turn and look at the monitor, but I wasn't thinking about why am I looking at this monitor now? But they just had a PVC and it had a little blip. So now I'm like, "What?" And I say I'm tuning it out, but I wasn't tuning it out.
No, you're
My
tracking in the
brain was just,
background.
like, funneled in on it in such a way that
Mhm.
I thought I wasn't listening, but if there was a change, I heard it. It's no different than mommy brain. When you're lying in the bed at night and you have small kids on the monitor and you're like, "Oh, I get great sleep. Why is my sleep score 50?" Because you really didn't go into deep sleep. You stayed in the light sleep because you were monitoring all night long. And so I
Mhm.
think we just have
Mhm.
to be aware of those kind of things. And a simple tactic could be on that lunch break, rather than listening to music or anything, putting some noise
Or looking
cancellation
at your
earphones on.
phone.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely not that. But yeah, put some noise cancellation earphones on and just sit and maybe have your lunch in silence just to give yourself a little bit of a reset.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that the the levels of sensory overload in a hospital environment, I had no idea. But I could not tune it out. I was not coping. I had to put my pager, like everything on silent, vibrate because I was so triggered by the noise constantly around me. And yeah, it was one of the reasons I love medicine, but I wasn't capable of it, and it really took a toll, and I didn't realize, like, how cumulative those levels are, and it's just cr yeah, like you mentioned, you're in an ICU, it is like a cacophony of alarms and sounds and beeps and monitors and things, and then you've got the fluorescent lights, and then people asking you, "What about this? What about this?" And then all of a sudden, you're like, no, can't do it. Or, now for me, it's I'm at home and the TV is on and it's a commercial and the commercials get louder. And then my husband's watching some video on his phone or something. Then my daughter starts telling me a story about something and I just go, oh my, and I put my hands over my ears and I just say, you guys have to stop. Like, I can't, it's too much. And they look at me like, what's wrong with mom? And I'm like, dude, it's too much input. there are too many things happening at once. And I don't think it's normal. We've normalized it in our society because we have so much tech and so many things going at all times, but our nervous systems are not designed for it.
No, our nervous systems aren't designed for our current culture. I think that's evident in all the different things that are going on. There's so much conversation about the stress response, cortisol, insulin, metabolic syndrome, all the different things that are happening in people's lives. And I feel a big part of it is just that our nervous system stays maxed out, and it stays in that stressed response, and it doesn't really know when is it supposed to wind down because we don't allow it opportunities to.
Yeah, we are meant to live in parasympathetic mode and activate sympathetic mode occasionally, not live in sympathetic mode and then occasionally try to drop into parasympathetic
And
mode,
that's where we're
right?
at now.
That's where we're at now.
That's
Yeah, it's
truly
it's
where we're
become
living.
inverted and it's not good. It's not sustainable. But I want to take a little detour and talk about emotional rest because I feel like it's one of the most common sources of deficit, but it's one that we don't necessarily always understand.
Yeah, emotional rest it starts by really having opportunities in your life to express your emotions without having to censor them and without having to suppress them in any way. But majority of our emotional energy is spent in suppression mode. Rarely can you just say what's on your mind as far as your emotions, particularly in a social setting, a professional social setting. Patient makes you mad, patient doesn't do what you want them to do, whatever happens, you don't get to just start ranting and yelling and screaming or whatever at people. You have to hold yourself back and try to figure out how you're gonna use your words in a nice way, and it's energy that we're expending, emotional energy, and then you compound that with social media, where you get on social media and you see people who are not suppressing anything. They're saying whatever they wanna say to however rude or however painful it may be to somebody because they don't know that person. And you're still processing
Yes.
because even though you're not saying it, your emotions are processing because I don't know, when you're reading something like that, most of us are like, wow, did they just say that? The only reason you said wow is because your emotions process that that's not emotionally correct behavior. And so we stay in this high level of emotional kind of flux from suppression to unhealthy expression. And then we have to figure out where am I supposed to be in between all of that? Because I don't want it to
Mm,
be, I don't want to spew on people my emotions, but I also can't stay in a place of suppression. And so that's what emotional rest is. It's the place in between where there's
mm,
safe spaces to be able to share what you authentically feel, whether it's politically correct or not. That's when you're sharing like with a therapist or a counselor or a trusted friend, or maybe in a journal. Maybe you're sharing it in some poetry that you write, where you're not
mm,
necessarily caring what anybody else thinks about what your emotions are saying. You're using those moments to offload truth from yourself, whatever your true emotion happens to be, because our true emotions aren't always politically correct. Sometimes our true emotion just is what it
mm.
is, and we have to have space to allow it to be without judgment, just to get it out of ourselves. But we have to know when and are safe places to do that.
So you mentioned journaling, therapy, maybe coffee with a trusted friend, and maybe a creative outlet. Like those would be some ways to kind of get that emotional fulfillment, emotional recharge, I guess,
Yeah,
rather than
you know,
rest. Exactly.
one thing that came to mind just because you were mentioning physicians, one of my surgical colleagues who's a male. He would go out on his fishing boat in early morning hours. He does not fish, but he would go on his boat in early morning hours, um, news usually, and he would sit out as far away from people and scream at the top of his lungs. And he said, I would scream, I would cry, I would grieve the patients I lost. He said, 'Cause there's no safe place for me to do that. I can't do it in the hospital. I can't do it at my home. My wife and kids would freak out. So I just go as far away into the woods on this boat as I possibly can, and I offload it. And I thought to myself, I think just about every person in oncology, in surgery, in internal
Yeah.
medicine in the ICU probably needs to do that a couple of times because most of us are in the profession because we are empaths. We have a high level of humanity. We don't like death. That's why we're there. We're fighting it. We're literally fighting it for ourselves and for other people and don't process it when it happens.
So much truth there. Oh, goodness. Yeah. So the other one that I'm intrigued by is creative rest. And again, similar to the social rest for me, I wonder if there's a balance between yes, overuse of, you're trying to creatively solve problems or use that part of your brain to ideate and generate. But then also, if you are depriving that part of your brain and your personality and your soul, and maybe there's a lack of creative expression, there's a lack of opportunity for creative appreciation in your life. Maybe you haven't seen a lot of beauty and art and nature. So, talk to us a little bit about creative rest and how to find it.
Yeah, creative rest is most of us have experienced it to some degree. We might not have understood what we were experiencing, but I know a lot of people will say, when I'm in the mountains or when I'm at the lake, I just feel so peaceful. I just feel like it just pours back into me. And that's really at the core of what creative rest is. It's the restorative feeling that we get when we allow ourselves to reflect upon the beauty that's around us. So whether that's natural beauty, whether that's artwork or going to the theater or watching someone perform a dance recital, or for some, they love traveling. And it's like, I don't know, when I go traveling, I just really feel like it rejuvenates me. Could it be that seeing new cultural things kind of awakens that creative element in you? Sometimes even just seeing different architecture in different cities can begin to awaken kind of some of those creative juices. And so that's at the core of creative rest, finding the things that unlock creativity inside of you, that inspire you, that bring that level of like innovation back to life.
Yeah, I like that. The inspiration and innovation tank that needs to be refilled. And it's so interesting because throughout this conversation and really throughout the conversation and dialogue on burnout in general, I mean, there's a lot of talk of rest, but is that the right word exactly? Or is it about recharging or replenishing or refilling or reconnecting somehow? Like, are there better words that we could use to describe it?
Yeah, I always say rest equals restoration with the REST or restoration capitalized because that's what I believe rest really is about. It's about restoration of places that have become depleted. So we have energy in all of these areas. We use energy in all of these areas. We just need to pour back into those energy reservoirs so that they stay at a high level of capacity.
Okay, I love that. Rest is restoration, people. And last but not least, I think spiritual rest might be one that people would have trouble grasping, especially if they are not of faith or not religious. And gee, what is spiritual rest for me? And how do I find it? Or how do I know if I'm depleted in it? And what can I do to restore it?
Yeah, spiritual rest is it's one where depending on your current faith-based beliefs and systems may look different. So spiritual rest, I'm a person of faith, so spiritual rest for me is really framed around religious and faith-based belief system. But I have a lot of clients obviously who don't have any faith-based system and so they still need spiritual rest because at the very core of it is the need that we all have for acceptance, belonging, love, and so if we're looking at it from a kind of a all-inclusive standpoint, it's the concept of every person is needing those things I just mentioned. How do we then pour back into that part of each other? So if you're a leader, let's say, and you don't have any faith system, what spiritual rest might look like for you is looking at where you interconnect with humanity. That might be causes or volunteerism or places where you're pouring back into the greater good, maybe with no specific faith-based system attached to whatever you're pouring back into, but you're giving up yourself in a way that allows you to get the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. And so I
Mm,
find that even like within companies, we do a lot of work with organizations and they're like, how does spiritual rest work within an organization? Well, most of the time organizations have, even in hospitals, we have these where you're reviewing, like a nurse might have a review about, or a physician may have a physician review where people are saying how well they did in certain aspects of their job. Usually the reviews are always looking at places to improve. Rarely is it looking at the things you did right. And so part of
mhm.
spiritual rest in that setting is including things like appreciation for what went right, gratitude for people in the work that they do, actually having empathy in situations when you're able to express that to someone and they can experience that. A simplified way of thinking of spiritual rest, I think most people have probably had at least seen it if they haven't experienced them themselves, where the person ahead of them, maybe in the coffee drive-through line, purchases them a coffee. And so they get up to the register and the bartista says, the car right ahead of you just purchased your coffee. That feeling that you get, you're like, "Oh, how nice, how sweet of them." That's great for you. The true spiritual rest came with the person who gave without knowing your response, simply because they wanted to do it. It wasn't dependent on you, your response, if you received it or if you rejected it. They were giving back into humanity just through the act of kindness. That's what spiritual rest is really all about.
I love that. And there's also, I guess, trying to connect to your purpose, the meaning behind why you do things. I think that oftentimes that gets lost in the setting of burnout. And that's where we have the cynicism set in. So, kind of the mirror image, the opposite of that. And just that, yeah, like what gives your life meaning and what brings joy to what you do regardless of yeah, like whether anyone is paying attention. So, yeah, okay, this is fantastic. Wow. I feel like we could talk all day long about, all of these different types of rest. And I'm still so fascinated to find out like how you discovered them, but how you figured this all out. Like that's a question that's kind of in the back of my mind. But
Well, my background's in biochemistry, so my habit is if I'm looking at a problem and it looks too big, you break it down to the molecule. So breaking rest down into smaller bite-sized pieces was kind of part of what I do. It's just how I look at things.
I love it. It's amazing. Well, we're going to wrap up this segment because I know that we could talk all day long, but we all got to get back to our different types of rest. We have a segment on the show called Rapid Fire, which I think is really fun because I ask folks little quick questions and they got to just answer off the top of their head. And sometimes they're not that quick, sometimes they're kind of deep. So here we go. Are you an early morning person or a late night person? I think I could probably guess, but maybe
Early
I'm wrong.
morning.
Yeah, that was going to be my guess. I am a late night person who wishes they were early morning, but that's okay. It's all right. The most underrated type of rest is, or is that a trick question?
The most underrated type of rest, I would probably say creative.
Yeah, because a lot of people think like, oh, well, I'm not creative. But we all are as human beings. We all are, right? Okay, what's the first sign that your batteries are kind of running low for you?
For myself, the very first sign is I don't have energy. It's like things that I love, I don't even have energy for that.
Yeah. Okay. A boundary I'm still working on is
Probably with my kids. I have very little boundaries with my kids. I'm like, "Oh, sure, whatever. Yes, I can make time for that. Of course, I'm not busy." Especially now that they're in college, I'm, like, excited anytime they're anywhere in the vicinity.
gosh, I can't my mama heart can't even conceive of that because she's my daughter's 12, but she's already like I said, "Can I have a hug for Mother's Day?" And she said, "I'll make an exception for Mother's Day." And this was like a stage 5 clinger child that I couldn't get off of me or out of my bed or anything for decades. Yeah, she's become very independent. A piece of advice that I would give my burned out former self is
That's easy. I think about this one often. Success is only successful if you enjoy your life.
Preach. That is, oh my gosh. I talk about this all the time because from the outside, oftentimes women who are very depleted, very burned out, they are quote unquote super successful. But sometimes success does not feel like it's supposed to. And that's definitely a sign that something is wrong and misaligned. I think we covered this one, but I think it's a great note to end on. And that is if rest had a different name that better captured what it actually is, what would you call it? You called it restoration.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that that is so beautiful and poignant in terms of just shifting the way we conceptualize rest and the way we give ourselves permission or don't give ourselves permission to rest. And maybe if we called it restoration, we'd have some better results. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's such a mindset shift that has to happen that calling it restoration is the beginning of the mindset shift. But at some point in time, we have to get to a place where rest is not like a four-letter word that we're running from. It's like when did work become like superior to rest? Can't
Mm,
they be in harmony with each other? I don't even like the word work-life balance. I like work-life harmony because I
harmony.
feel like
I like
there
that.
should be harmony between our work and our rest and our professional life and our private life. They should all be in a level of harmony with each other.
Right. Because work life balance implies this like moment in time that's very much teetering on an edge. And harmony is more of an environment, a condition. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that, you know, oh, what's her name? Trisha Hersey, the Nat Ministry. She's so cool, and she's the concept of that, rest is revolutionary, and I think that that's where we need to go with it because 'cause we're taking back control of ourselves and our lives and our destiny and our dreams, and we can't just keep sacrificing ourselves and hope that it's all gonna work out in the end, because we'll burn ourselves out doing that.
Absolutely. So true.
Well, I think this episode has been absolutely incredible. I think our listeners are gonna love it. Tell folks where they can find out more, where they can take the quiz. So there's a quiz, guys, that you can take and find out how you're doing on your 7 types of rest, and how do we find that?
Yeah, super simple. Restquiz.com. And they will get a score in all seven types of rest so that they can see where they need to begin their personal rest journey.
We will definitely put that in the show notes. And where else can folks discover you and learn more about you and get your books?
Yeah. So the title of the book for this particular conversation is Sacred Rest Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity. It's available wherever books are sold. And I Choose My Best Life is the name of both my podcast and my main website where people can go to learn about the work that we're doing and to get other resources.
Fantastic. Well, if you are listening and you love this episode, please give us a like and a review. It really does help more folks discover the show, and definitely share this episode with a friend. I think that, you know, we all have friends who could benefit from learning about more about the 7 types of rest. And so all of this is going to be in the show notes. Get in touch with Dr. Saundra. And as always, remember, burnout is not your destiny. It's your wake up call.